Alice Gross was born on Valentine's Day, February 14, 2000, in London. She grew up in a full loving family. She also had an older sister. From an early age, the girl demonstrated a craving for creativity. She loved to draw, played the piano and violin, and later began writing her own magnificent songs and performing them to her own music. We will show one such composition performed by Alice at the end of this video. In addition, the girl was interested in clothing design, and at the age of 11 she even created a dress for herself that she planned to wear to her school prom. When the girl was 13 years old, doctors diagnosed her with anorexia and depression. Despite all this, Alice continued to be creative, and in the future she had every chance of achieving tremendous success. On August 28, 2014, Alice told her mom that she was going for a walk. She had school holidays and a lot of free time, so the girl loved to walk along a small water canal and river not far from her house. She and her family lived in a London suburb called Hanwell, and her usual route was 4.5 kilometers. The girl left at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, promising her parents to return around 6 in the evening. She later wrote to her father that she would be home soon, but Alice did not return at the appointed time. When it was already 7 in the evening, her parents began to worry. They tried to call her, but the girl's phone was turned off. The fact that Alice suffered from anorexia and depression only added to the anxiety. Her parents were afraid that something might happen to her. Due to her physical condition, she experienced constant weakness and could faint. Her parents called several of her friends in the hope that Alice might be with them, but no one saw the girl that day, and her mother and father decided to contact the police. They immediately began searching and first of all studied the route along which Alice usually walked. Her relatives and family friends also took part in the search. Alas, no trace of the girl could be found. But detectives were able to find several witnesses thanks to their testimony about the places where Alice had passed. The police were able to more accurately determine the route, and this, in turn, made it possible to narrow the search area and select several street cameras that could film it. After reviewing the records, detectives actually found Alice almost immediately after leaving the house. She was caught on camera 1 while walking along the Grand Union Canal. Some time later she was spotted in the Brentford area, which was located further down the canal. The last time the camera captured her was on the way back not far from home. The girl was walking near the tramway pier bridge. The police also passed information about the teenager's disappearance to the media, and within the first hours after the disappearance they spread news of the case throughout London. Thanks to this, detectives received several calls from witnesses who saw Alice. Unfortunately, all this did not bring the police any closer to finding the girl. Based on camera footage and witnesses, she disappeared on her way home, covering most of her usual route. But what happened to her remained a mystery. 3 days have passed. Police continued to review camera footage in nearby areas and also searched local parks and other secluded areas. At the same time, patrol officers went to houses along Alice's route and asked questions of local residents. On September 1st, the girl's relatives recorded a video message in which they begged her to return home. They also asked anyone with any information about her whereabouts to contact police. At the time, investigators were considering several theories. The first and most alarming version was about kidnapping. Despite the fact that most of Alice's route passed along city streets, there were many remote and hidden areas where the girl could be attacked. In addition, London police often encounter situations where people are kidnapped right in the city centre, let alone in the suburbs. The second theory was about running away from home. Alice's parents were afraid that depression could push her to such a decision. They also did not rule out that the girl could take her own life due to her illnesses. But for the police, these versions seemed unlikely. At the age of 14, Alice would hardly have been able to run away and hide, especially without outside help. And if she had taken her own life, with a high degree of probability she would have already been found. Every day this case attracted more and more attention from the public, and on September 3rd it was transferred to a special unit of Scotland Yard. Despite the fact that they usually only worked on homicides, detectives assessed the chances of the girl returning home as high. Scotland Yard organised a large-scale search, which was immediately joined by hundreds of volunteers. After seeing the heartbreaking appeal of the parents and sister on the news, concerned Londoners combed the area from early morning until night. The very next day, detectives announced the discovery of the first significant evidence. They managed to find Alice's backpack, which contained the boots she was wearing that day. It was located relatively close to her house. This discovery allowed police to narrow the search area, focusing on a small area near the canal. Investigators understood that it was unlikely that the girl took off her shoes herself and threw them along with her backpack, escaping. She didn't have any replacement shoes with her, so the situation became more and more confusing. Scotland Yard decided to publish all available footage from the cameras that Alice was caught on. The backpack containing the shoes indicated that the girl could be in serious danger. The main version was still kidnapping. However, investigators did not completely rule out the possibility that the girl could have committed suicide. For this reason, they tried to use all available resources to detect it. Publishing the recordings may have attracted more attention among the public, and someone might have remembered seeing Alice that day. At the same time, several hundred more employees from various departments were involved in the search, and 600 people were already working on this case. Thus, this investigation became the largest in terms of the number of police officers involved since 2005. Some of them were directly examining the area, others were studying the recordings of hundreds of cameras that Alice could have seen. Scotland Yard has also offered a £20,000 reward for any information leading to the girl's recovery. Although police were unable to locate her phone, they asked the cell phone company for its last known location. It turned out that Alice sent a message to her father from almost the same place where her backpack would later be found. Everything indicated that investigators needed to concentrate on this area. In this regard, it was decided to thoroughly examine an area of several square kilometers. Every meter of land and water was studied manually. Police teams literally probed the bottom of the river and canal for any evidence. 2 days after the discovery of the backpack, it became known that the police had arrested a 25-year-old man on suspicion of murdering Alice. The next day they arrested another person, but refused to comment on the situation until all the details were clarified. However, both suspects were soon released, and Scotland Yard stated that they were unable to establish the involvement of these two people in Alice's disappearance. More than a week passed, and during all this time there was no progress in the case. Only on September 16 the police made another statement. They said they were looking for a 41-year-old man named Ernest Charles Collins in connection with Alice's disappearance. He moved to England from Latvia 7 years ago, lived in this area and worked as a builder. Scotland Yard became interested in him for two reasons, which at first glance seemed unrelated. Firstly, Ernest's work colleagues reported his disappearance to the police on September 3. The man did not show up for work, did not answer calls, and was not at home. It seemed that he simply evaporated. Secondly, detectives found that Sting Collins's route from home to work followed approximately the same path that the girl had taken on the day of her disappearance. All this was not yet enough to draw any conclusions about the man's involvement in the girl's disappearance, but detectives soon discovered something truly disturbing. In one of the camera recordings, they noticed a middle-aged man riding a bicycle along the bridge where Alice had passed just a few minutes earlier. This man turned out to be Sting Collins. After some time, he got to the next camera, and here the detectives noticed a very strange thing. The path between these cameras should have taken only a few minutes, but it took a man on a bicycle almost an hour to travel along this road. A reasonable question arose: what was he doing all this time in such a short period? The police examined the area and came to the conclusion that he could not have traveled to the next cell along a longer route, since it simply did not exist. Even more alarming was the fact that all this happened in the very area where Alice's path supposedly ended. Police also concluded that the man's clothes were wet when he drove onto the road. Continuing to study the cameras, detectives noticed how Sting Collins returned to the same place on his bicycle 2 hours later and left 50 minutes later. However, he was not captured by the camera located on the bridge, which indicated that the man spent all this time inside a small blind spot. In addition, he was already wearing other clothes. About an hour later, he was caught on camera at a local store buying beer. The next morning the situation repeated itself. Sting Collins returned to the same place between the cells at about 7 o'clock, and also returned there again in the evening. All this was enough to obtain a search warrant for his home. It turned out that the man lived there with his girlfriend and the 2 daughters together. His partner also had no idea where Sting Collins had gone. Having learned that he was suspected of murdering a girl, she stated that Arnes could never have done something like that. She described him as a caring and loving father. At the same time, Scotland Yard studied the man's biography and discovered that he had a rich criminal past. In 1998, while in Latvia, he coldly and prudently killed his wife, having previously dug a grave for her in the forest, for which he received only 7 years in prison. After serving his sentence, he moved to England, and local law enforcement agencies did not even know about his criminal record in his homeland. The police searched the house of Arnes Salkones and discovered a newly dug plot of land on his territory. They did not disclose whether they were able to find any evidence there. But in the basement of the house, a significant discovery awaited them. A broken back panel from a white iPhone 4s was found there. Alice had exactly the same phone. After examining the contents of his computer, police also found out that the man was looking on the internet for information about the disappearance of Alice Gross. A few days after the incident, based on all this, Arnes Salkones was put on the wanted list. Scotland Yard feared that the man might have fled back to Latvia or another European country, so they searched for him throughout the European Union. But law enforcement agencies were unable to find a single trace of the suspect. Meanwhile, a month had passed since Alice's disappearance, and on September 30th the police issued a depressing statement. A human body was found in the river not far from where the girl disappeared. At that time, the identity had not yet been established, but the police shared one creepy fact: someone made a significant effort and organized everything so that the body remained under water and did not float to the surface. Only the next day did law enforcement confirm that the deceased was Alice Gross. No one doubted this path anymore. Everything happened exactly in the place where she disappeared. The cause of death was strangulation. It turned out that Alice's body was wrapped in construction bags tied to a large stone. In addition, the criminal made a whole structure from a bicycle wheel and bricks, which also did not allow the body to float up. She also had no clothes on, except for one sock. Detectives visited the construction site where Salkones worked and found out that the same bags used at his construction site were used to hide Alice's body. After the discovery of the body, police continued to search for Salkones, working closely with Interpol and local European intelligence agencies, but they were still unable to find any trace of him. This continued until October 4th, when investigators made an unexpected discovery. They found the man's hanging body in a park located just a kilometer from the scene of Alice's murder. 2 days later, experts confirmed that the deceased was Arnes Salkones. No one expected such a turn of events. Scotland Yard's main version was that the suspect escaped to Europe, but in reality it turned out that he had been under their noses all this time. Medical experts concluded that the man took his own life on the day of his disappearance on September 3rd, and he could not be found for a month. However, there is nothing surprising here. Salkones chose a very remote and inaccessible place, where it was extremely difficult to notice him. With Salkones' DNA in hand, investigators obtained even more evidence. Near the place where Alice's body was found, the police found a cigarette butt, which was sent to the laboratory. Experts recovered DNA from the filter, which matched Salkones' sample. In addition, the laboratory stated that it is highly likely that the criminal's DNA was found on the victim's body. They could not say this with 100% certainty due to how long the body had been underwater. His DNA was also found on the girl's backpack and shoes. By that time, the police had found out another terrible fact. It turned out that 2 years after moving to England, Salkones molested a 14-year-old girl just a kilometer from the place where Alice's body was found. The man tried to commit some indecent acts, but the victim survived and the man was arrested. This is where the fun begins. The girl did not press formal charges, and the criminal was simply released. It is not entirely clear how this could happen, but the fact remains: an adult man molested a girl, fell into the hands of the police and escaped punishment. Moreover, information about this case surfaced after the body of the criminal was found in the park. Despite all this, the police continued their investigation. It took them some time to piece together what had happened. According to their version, on that ill-fated day, August 28, Salkeld rode his bicycle along the same route where Alice was walking. Noticing her in a secluded area, hidden from prying eyes, he attacked her with the aim of committing depraved acts. How events developed further, we will never know, but the result was tragic. Salkeld killed Alice, after which he hid her body in several approaches, constantly returning to that place. We will also never know why he decided to take his own life after what he did. Whether this can be called a manifestation of conscience is a very controversial issue. Alice's parents, who experienced such a terrible tragedy, were outraged by the government's actions. They wondered how the British authorities allowed a convicted murderer to enter the country and live here. They have spent many years fighting for the government to tighten controls on migrants and keep criminals out of the country. Unfortunately, they have not been able to achieve serious changes to this day. A month after the discovery of Salkeld's body, another interesting event occurred. The medical expert involved in this investigation left a folder with documents on the case on the train. The 30 pages contained vital information about the murder, including medical data and undisclosed details. The public, the media and Alice's parents harshly criticized the police, but they could no longer do anything. They could not find the folder. However, no one tried the late criminal anyway. Investigators said that if he had lived, they would have had enough evidence to take the case to trial. But there was no guarantee of a guilty verdict. The problem is that all the available evidence against Salkeld was circumstantial, and he had a chance to escape punishment, albeit a small one. Instead, a hearing was held, as a result of which the jury recognized the already obvious fact: Alice was murdered, her death was not an accident. This procedure was formal in nature and did not play a special role. Alice's funeral took place on October 23. Thousands of people came to the memorial that day, and at the end of the ceremony, a beautiful song that the girl wrote and performed herself was shown on the big screen.